Hi everybody, thank you for joining me for this beauty review. Today I'm going to be giving a review about the Everyday Minerals mixing jars and the Everyday Mineral powder puff. So, start with the mixing jar. This is about twice as big as the loose powder jars. So here's a loose powder jar, and here's a mixing jar. You can tell it's twice the size. I mean, from this side it looks the same, but one's deeper than the other. And the mixing jar opens up like this. This part basically looks exactly the same. It's got holes right here, just like the loose powder. Holes. So I don't do a lot of mixing, but for those of you who do mix, one of these large jars could be very helpful. So I think I didn't do it with this one. I got a couple of these. What you're supposed to do is you take off the sifter and you put in the proportions of the powders that you want, and then you just use the brush to kind of mix it up, or you can just, close up the jar and just kind of shake it up. I don't think you're supposed to fill the jars to the top, otherwise it's not going to be any space to mix the powders. I personally find that mixing is kind of messy. I don't like to mix too much, but sometimes that's kind of what you have to do if you are between two foundation shades. Everyday Minerals has a lot of shades, and I think for most people you should be able to find a shade that matches you 95% without mixing. If you're a perfectionist, maybe that extra 5% is worth getting one of these jars and going through the hassle of mixing these powders. But personally, I think these jars are pretty convenient, but only get these if you're really going to use them. I don't do too much mixing, so one or two of these for me is more than enough. That's that. This is the Everyday Minerals Powder Puff. I feel like the website made such a big deal out of these, I just had to get one to see what the hype was all about. I was talking about the pressed powder in another video, and I mentioned that these powders, because they break so easily, you cannot carry these around in your purse. Unless you want to repress it yourself, which is more work. So these you can't carry around in your purse, but these you can. I guess Everyday Minerals felt like they had to redeem themselves with something that you can tote around. So these powder puffs, they're very cute. See them, and they have a mirror on top right here, and they open up like this. Basically you pull off, and here's your puff right here. And the way it works is that you unscrew the bottom, and this is basically where your powder goes. I didn't put very much powder in here, but you can kind of see that I put in a little bit of powder. And once you put that powder in, you screw it back on, and basically you turn it upside down, and the powder goes in through here. There's a hole right here. So what's supposed to happen is the powder sifts through this hole, and it works its way through the sponge to this side. So you go like this, and you kind of do this. I usually keep it closed when I do that. So you're going to do this for a little bit, and then you can open it back up again. You use the mirror, and then you just use this to puff your face. Now the problem that I'm having with this sponge is that I mentioned in the other video with these powders that the sponge that they supply in here doesn't do a great job at applying the powder. This is a different sponge. Unfortunately, it doesn't do a much better, it does a slightly better job than the sponges that they give you in these. But this does not give you that airbrush look. On top of that, it's really hard, at least I think, to have the powder work its way through the sponge. And then when you're puffing, you have to really press. And when you do that, I don't know how many of you have seen those old movies in which they have those powder puffs. The powder, it gets into the air. It's just, with every puff, I can just see a little cloud of powder just kind of floating off of my skin. And it's not so much the wasted powder that is concerning me, but you could be easily breathing that stuff in, and that's not really something you want to be breathing in. So, if you're outside, I think this is something that's good to use if you're outside, and it's windy or something, and it just gives rid of the extra air powder for you. Otherwise, I don't particularly like using this, just because it's so difficult to get the powder to work through the sponge and get onto my skin, and then a little puff of powder kind of evaporates and breathing it. So what I do is I love the mirror. I love the packaging of this powder puff. So what I do is that I use this as a mirror. I bring my little long handle kabuki brush with me, and I do this, and there's usually some powder right on here or in there, and I just use the brush to get it up, and then I use the mirror and I just apply it on my face, and it works great. So unfortunately, I feel like that Everyday Minerals needs to work on something that can really be carried around by itself, because as of now, whether it's the powder puff or the pressed powder, I've got to carry the kabuki brush with me just to ensure that same even, flawless coverage. But aside from that, I don't have a problem carrying the brush with me, and I really do like the packaging of this. So if you want to give this one a try, it's decent. If you really don't like powder puffs, then this is probably not for you. And the mixing jar, again, if you do mixing, then 1 or 2 is more than enough. If you don't really mix, then you probably don't really need this unless you really just want to put your powder in a bigger jar, which I can maybe understand, because mineral powder sometimes is good to kind of distribute it along a surface. It makes for a better, more even application. So that's that. If you have any other questions, feel free to message me. And thank you for watching.